Hello and welcome to Tech Deal's system performance comparison between 4 desktop computers. Today we're going to be comparing 4 different games on 4 different desktop PCs, 2 custom builds and 2 pre-builts, 1 new and 1 used. The 4 computers that we're testing today cover 4 different price points: $400, $500, $600, and $700. This test is not meant to be a strict apples-to-apples comparison. Instead, we're testing 4 different processors and 4 different graphics cards at 4 different price points. The idea is to show you what you can get for the money, while at the same time putting together performance videos for 4 different machines that I've covered previously. Now, linked in the video description below are going to be the full playlists of each of these computers. Check them out if you're interested in any of these processors or any of these total system builds. First up, we have the $500 custom build, the Intel Pentium G4560 2-core 4-thread machine. 16 gigabytes of DDR4, 2400 MHz RAM with the Asus Republic of Gamers Strix RX 470 4GB graphics card. Next up is the $600 custom build with the AMD FX-8300 CPU running at 4.2 GHz, 16 gigs of DDR3 2133, and MSI's Gaming X RX 480 4GB graphics card. Third, we have a $400 Dell used PC with the Intel Core i5-2400 second generation processor, 16 gigs of DDR3 at 1333. EVGA's GeForce GTX 1060 3GB superclocked is installed in this computer. And finally, we have the top-of-the-line Acer Aspire $700 Intel Core i5-7400. This is the 7th generation Kaby Lake chip with 16 gigs of DDR4 running at 2133, and this one has the EVGA GeForce GTX 1060 6GB superclock card installed into it. Now, the first question that I'm sure is to come up is, wait a minute, how in the world are you testing these processors or these graphics cards when nothing is the same between the computers? The RAM speed's not the same, the graphics cards are different, the CPUs are different. That's okay. We are not testing specific components. We are instead testing price points and complete system builds. I have covered each of these options extensively in prior videos. The i5-2400 are excellent deals on eBay right now. You can buy Dells and HPs and Lenovo's for $150 or less. Drop a graphics card in, they're great machines. I have whole build video series on the 2 custom machines, build videos, Windows setup, Windows performance, parts overview, all that's linked in the description below. And then the top of the line Acer Aspire with the 7th gen Kaby Lake chip is a machine you can order new off of Amazon, install a graphics card, and game away. So if you're looking for what is the actual exact performance difference between an RX 470 and 480 or the 3 and 6 gig GTX 1060 cards, this is not that video. You cannot use the results in this video to strictly determine what the difference between the 4 graphics cards is or what the difference between the 4 CPUs is. That's not the point. The point is, at these price points, this is the best hardware that I could fit in at these prices. You could absolutely put a better graphics card in the Dell, for example. You could absolutely put the RX 480 into the Pentium G4560. But then the price points get missed. So we're testing 4 specific price points with the best build that I could put together at those price points. Now, the performance test we're watching right now is the G4560, the $500 build. The numbers in green at the top left corner of the screen are from MSI Afterburner, a free program you can download and use to monitor your performance in real time. Now, I've covered that in a separate video, so if you want to know how to download and set it up, by all means go search for MSI Afterburner on my channel and you will find a video that covers that in more detail. All of these gameplay videos were recorded using my external Elgato HD60 Pro hardware capture card. They were not recorded using NVIDIA Shadowplay or Relive software, so there is no performance penalty for any of the recordings that you are watching. The performance numbers were obtained by Fraps. Fraps did not record the video, just the performance, very, very minor performance impact, but it recorded the frame rates, the minimum, maximum, and average numbers that you will see at the end of this video. I'll have charts and comparisons galore. Now, as you watch this video, if you become bored and go, you know, I get the point, I've seen it, I really just want to see the charts, I understand. This is going to be a long video. Fast forward to the end. Somewhere in the last 5 or 10 minutes are going to be all the performance charts for these 4 games on these 4 machines. So if you don't want to watch the hour plus of video that's going to be here, scroll to the end, it'll be right there for you. But if you do skip ahead, I think you miss half the point of the video, which is there's more to game performance than frame rate numbers, minimums, maximums, and average. That is an epic drop, and I can't believe that car didn't explode. That must have hurt. And look, it still drives. I don't think a Dodge Viper, which is what I think that car is supposed to be, would be drivable after that. But hey, who's counting? Anyway, I want you to look at the real-time frame rate, and then I want you to consider something. This game was absolutely totally smooth on this machine. Now, I've played Grand Theft Auto 5 on dual-core machines in the past. The Pentium G4400, the Skylake predecessor to this, was 2 cores, 2 threads. This, the G4560, is 2 cores, 4 threads. The only real difference between the chips, besides faster RAM, better motherboard, a few other things, is the hyper-threading. 4 threads. Now, it really is still just a 2-core chip, but that hyper-threading makes all the difference because Grand Theft Auto 5 is terrible on a 2-core, 2-thread CPU. It really needs 4 threads. Side note, if you listen to everything I'm saying right now, worried that I'm going to repeat myself or go over and over this, I'm going to put most of the commentary in the Grand Theft Auto 5 footage. It's by far the largest. The other 3 games that we're testing, World of Tanks, Fallout 4, and Hitman, are going to be much, much shorter. So I'm appending those so I don't repeat myself over and over for gameplay performance. You can watch this here during Grand Theft Auto 5, and then you get 2 more game performance videos after that. Anyway, back to the smoothness. That is a critical component of this as far as I'm concerned. If you have a high frame rate, but the game is not smooth in terms of input lag, if you're pressing buttons and keys and there's a delay between when action happens on the screen and when you press the, hey, that guy ran me from behind, and when things happen, the game's not playable. On the flip side, if the game is immediately responsive to your inputs, if you press keys, move the mouse, and the game responds instantly, but you're stuck at 30 frames per second, the game actually is usually still completely, totally playable. Now, coming back to the performance numbers, there's something I want you to watch 2 numbers of. The 2 percentages in front of the GPU and the CPU, RX470 and then the G4560. Those are the percentages of total utilization of those processors. Now, the graphics card keeps bouncing between almost 99% and 0%, and that's because it is starved of information from our CPU. Now, this is a 2-thread 4-core processor. Anything over 50% usage on a hyper-threaded chip, and this goes for any hyper-threaded chip, anything over 50% usage and you are into the hyper-threads, you are going beyond your real execution units. Yes, it's smoother than a 2-core 2-thread chip, but it's no substitute for the real deal. There, we just dropped to 5% on the RX470. The RX470 is actually powerful enough that it's bored. It's sitting around with nothing to do while the CPU cannot keep it fed. An i5 would make a big difference here because an i5 has 4 true processing cores compared to the 2 true processing cores here. Let me draw your attention to the VRAM. We're using about 3.3 gigabytes of VRAM. 4 gigs is just fine, to which you might say, wait a minute, isn't one of the cards in this test a 3 gig card? Won't that be a problem? No, it really won't. That little margin of difference isn't going to make a major dramatic performance difference, but it is a little bit in any case. Now, looking at our main system RAM, I do have 16 gigs installed, but 8 would in fact run this game just fine. It would be a little smoother with 16, but not faster. Windows will use all the available free RAM for disk cache. So when you're driving around an open world game such as this, components, elements, scenery, things that need to be loaded from the drive dynamically as you are driving can be stored in the disk cache. So your overall experience, especially if you drive around the whole island, will ultimately be better with 16 gigs of RAM. Not faster, better. Or when I say better, smoother is perhaps the correct word. Now, you'll see that our frame rate does not hold at 60 frames per second all the time, but it's really good. Consider this is a brand new custom-built computer for $500, and it's playing Grand Theft Auto 5 beautifully. Alright, that's enough for the G4560. How about the AMD FX-8300? Again, this is amazing considering this CPU is really 5 years old. The whole FX line, the 6300, the 8300, and all the derivatives, the 8350, the 8370, the 8320, even the 9590, are all basically the same CPU, and they all date from the beginning of 2012. Now we're in the beginning of 2017, so these CPUs, the design, the architecture, are in fact 5 years old. However, they're now a bargain. This FX-8300 CPU can now be purchased for under $100. It is amazing what it will do for that price point. Now, we do have an upgraded graphics card in this machine, an RX 480. What is the real performance difference between a 470 and a 480? About 10%. They're the same card for the most part. The RAM is a little bit different in terms of speed between them. Not much, but a little bit, although different cards can have different speed RAM. This one, the MSI Gaming X, is a really, really good top-end card. The other one, the Asus Strix Republic of Gamers, is also a very good card. Neither of these are reference cards. They're very nice. They're both factory overclock cards. Now, if you look at our VRAM usage here, you'll see it's a little bit higher than it was on the last run. We're at about 3.5 gigabytes. Nice. Now, the details, as I said before, are turned up to high. If you go to very high, the graphics VRAM usage will go up a bit, but it generally never goes above 4 gigabytes, at least at 1080p resolution. You have to go higher than that. If you're at 1440p, you can get it above 4 gigabytes, and that's why for 1440p resolution, I recommend either the 6 gig GTX 1060 or the 8 gig RX 480, but the 4 gig card is just fine for 1080p gaming. Now take a look at our CPU usage. It's right around 50%. It does jump up from there. Now, this is an 8-thread CPU, so when we're at 50% usage, we're using 4 of our 8 threads. What this shows is that even with just an RX 480, which is a mid-level graphics card, Grand Theft Auto 5 absolutely will use more than 4 threads. The days of all games being 4 threads or less are over, and Grand Theft Auto 5 is not new. Battlefield 1 and other games will also now use more than 4 threads. So my recommendation, if you're a serious gamer, is to get an 8-thread CPU at least if you can afford it. However, when you watch the performance on the i5 machines, I think you'll find it's very acceptable. You'll notice that the main system RAM usage is higher here. I have noticed that main system RAM usage varies tremendously between machine to machine and run to run. Part of it might be Grand Theft Auto 5, part of it might be anything that I've run before or after the benchmark, part of it might just be that specific installation of Windows. Couple of points. These are individual discrete computers built into cases. I'm not just swapping out parts between runs. These are their own machines with their own installations of Windows. That being said, all 4 of these machines have clean, fresh installs of Windows 10 with the exception of the Acer Aspire, which has the factory installation, although it was 3 days old when I recorded this. It was absolutely brand new out of the box. Oh, that's gonna hurt, and ooh. Well, thankfully it just stings for a second. It is also worth noting that I don't have anything running in the background on these computers, other than, of course, the parts of Windows you can't disable. You've got Fraps recording the frame rate, MSI Afterburner recording or showing the real-time performance numbers. The game, in this case, Steam has to be running because it's a Steam game. There's nothing else running. The recording is taking place on another machine. I have nothing else open. So why is the RAM usage different? Good question. I have found that I can close the game, reboot the machine, launch it, and get a different RAM number usage every time. Windows 7 didn't used to be like this, and unfortunately Windows 10, with all of its background tasks and the fact that you can be in the middle of benchmarking and it'll just decide, hey, now's a good time to run Windows compatibility checks and Windows updates in the background. I have actually had to redo benchmarks because right in the middle of it, Windows decides, I'm going to do something, even when you try to turn it all off. Yay, Windows 10. Anyway, not like we have a choice. If we want to run the latest and greatest games, you kind of have to these days. Okay, moving on from that, because I don't want to get into the whole Windows nonsense. What I will say is if you watch the GPU usage, the RX 480, you will see it's bouncing around like it was on the previous one. There's something important to note about the FX series of processors. Their multi-threaded performance is spectacular. The video editing, rendering, 3D animation performance, when you can use all 8 threads, these CPUs are incredible. The value you get for $100 for this CPU is just It beggars the belief. However, its single core performance is frankly not that great. In fact, it's roughly equal to the single core performance of the i5-2400. So 6-year-old Intel chips and a 5-year-old AMD chip have roughly the same single core performance. What the Pentium G4560 and the i5-7400 have going for it are spectacular single core performance. To give you a comparison, the Pentium G4560, which runs at 3.5 GHz, is still faster when you only need 2 cores or 2 threads than the FX-8300 is at 4.2. There's just no comparison. It is noticeably faster. It's when you go beyond 2 cores and 2 threads that the FX chip will start to catch up because of its 8 threads. Alright, that's enough of the FX-8300. How about we take a look at the i5-2400, the $400 budget option used either HP, Dell, Lenovo, etc. off of eBay with a graphics card and a little bit of RAM dropped into it. Now, I've covered this deal on my channel numerous times in the past, and really, in terms of performance for the dollar, this is the deal. Out of everything I'm going to show you in this video today, in terms of the frames you get per dollar spent, there is no better deal than this particular machine. So if your question is which of these is the best price to performance, well, it's the i5-2400 without any doubt whatsoever. Okay then, it's great to say that it's the best price to performance, but how does it perform? Is it playable? Well, see for yourself. And this is why I include live gameplay like this rather than just putting up a bunch of charts and putting some music to it and calling it a video. I don't think that's very informative. You can go to websites for charts. You come to YouTube because you want to watch gameplay and you want to see the actual video. Now, first things first, take a look at our graphics card. Our graphics card is not busy, but instead of bouncing between 100% usage and 0% usage, NVIDIA's cards handle it differently. Instead, they just run at a modest usage. So the AMD cards bounce around 100%, 0%, 100%, 0%. The NVIDIA cards are running, in this case, at about 38 to 40%. Here's why this number is important. If you replace this GTX 1060 with a GTX 1050 Ti, you'd be getting the same frame rate. We are actually CPU limited here, not GPU limited. As amazing as it sounds, Grand Theft Auto 5 is a heavily CPU-bound game, and this CPU is holding back the performance of this graphics card. Now, there are benefits to having a GTX 1060. It's just not Grand Theft Auto 5 on this CPU. Now, I've got 12 games tested and recorded on these 4 machines, and I'll be doing several videos over the next few weeks on this. Other games do show the benefit of having a more powerful graphics card. It's just that Grand Theft Auto 5 is not one of them. Now, you may say, wait a minute, the CPU's not at 100%. How in the world can you say that? No, it's not. But that's because of the area we're in or the stuff that we're doing. It is using over 75% most of the time, so it's in to all 4 cores. It's just not using them to 100% capacity. Very rarely will you ever see 100 or 99% CPU usage. Usually it comes off of that for a variety of reasons. Either it has to access system memory, or you have cache hit misses, or it's loading something from the hard drive. It doesn't take much to have that come down. One interesting note, and I commented on this in the last run, look at our main system RAM usage. We're over 10 gigabytes of RAM. Now, as I said before, there is nothing else running in the background. This is a fresh installation of Windows, less than a month old. Go figure. I just noticed that Grand Theft Auto 5, more than any other game that I test, has wildly different RAM usages from run to run and machine to machine. So I'm not entirely sure why, but high-end machines are sometimes lower usage, low-end machines are sometimes high usage, and if I were to close this, reboot, and restart it, it'd be a completely different number. Oh well. So looking at our frame rate, we're over 60 frames per second. So while we're not using our graphics card to its fullest, it certainly is giving us great performance. There is one other piece of information you can draw from this, however. You could play this game on this computer at 1440p and get exactly the same frame rate. Why? Because the graphics card is hardly being used. It's got less than 50% usage. So we could double the resolution to 1440p and we'd still have 60 frames per second playable performance. Now you might ask the question, well, why didn't you test at 1440p? Well, first of all, Grand Theft Auto 5 is an exception to the rule. You couldn't do that with this computer on most of the games. You could on some, but not most. Second of all, 1080p is the #1 resolution that people play at. More than anything else, 1080p is where it's at. And if you're playing at 1440p, are you really going out and buying or using a used budget machine and with a nice high-end monitor? It kind of doesn't really go together, because if you go out and buy yourself a nice $300 or $400 1440p monitor, you probably should spend more than that on the computer. At least I think so. In any case, we're doing 1080p just to see what each of the games does across all 4 computers. Now here's what's interesting. Take a look at the VRAM usage, which I talked about that in the previous 2 runs. We're less than 3 gigabytes of VRAM. Go figure. Now, our main system RAM usage is high, but our VRAM usage is low. Now, is it possible that Grand Theft Auto 5 is using more VRAM because we have a lower end card and thus less room? Yes, it's possible, but then we should be really close, maybe at 2.8. Ow, that hurt. We should be at 2.8 or 2.9 VRAM usage. So it's possible that that extra VRAM usage is in fact the game compensating. Look at the frame rate though. It certainly doesn't seem like it to me. Our frame rate is spectacular. We're at 60 frames. Close enough. Here's something worth noting on this machine, however. While the frame rate's great, in terms of stutter, in terms of variability of performance, this is the worst of all 3 machines. Interestingly enough, even though this has a higher average frame rate than the Pentium G4560, and you'll see that in the end at the end of these videos, spoiler alert, it's smoother. The stuttering, and I don't know if you can see any of it here. I can in the raw file. Whether it will come through once YouTube compresses the file, I don't know, but gameplay was smoother on the Pentium G4560, but it was faster on this machine. Now, that will not be reflected in the minimum frame rate either. I'm talking about my feeling of actually playing the game, and that's different than a benchmark. That is, do I think this machine is fluid and smooth? It's smooth enough, but if you want a more smooth performance, this isn't it. While that's true, the i5-2400 remains the best price to performance option in this test and an excellent choice for anyone looking to game on a budget. Now let's take a look at the higher end option, the i5-7400. Now this is a brand new Acer Aspire T computer that you can buy off of Amazon for $450. I have added an additional 8 gigabytes of system RAM and installed the GTX 1060 6GB card into this machine. This is a very, very nice computer. Now one question I'm sure is going to come up is, wait a minute, this is a 7th gen machine, why does it have 16 gigabytes of DDR4 2133? Wasn't that Skylake? Shouldn't the 7th gen have DDR4 2400? Yes it should. Acer is using an H110 chipset in this with an updated BIOS to support Kaby Lake, which is why it's running at 2133. Normally with a B250 motherboard, you would in fact have DDR4 2400, and that is why the Pentium G4560 has DDR4 2400, whereas this computer only has DDR4 2133, because this actually still has an H110 chipset. Does it make a difference? Not really, not for gaming or the kind of tasks that a $450 pre-built computer are really meant to do. Last year, I extensively covered the previous model of this computer with an i5-6400, and at the time, I said that was the best deal on a pre-built computer that you could buy for under $500 on Amazon. That's true today as well. This Acer Aspire T with the i5-7400 is the best pre-built computer you can buy off of Amazon today for under $500. If that's your budget, if that's what you want to do, this is the deal. That being said, small little tidbit here, if you're going to spend $700, I wouldn't buy this computer. Now, you can, because you might want to customize it with your own graphics card, or you might want to make the graphics card upgrade later. It does come with Intel's HD 630, which will play some games. Not really Grand Theft Auto 5, but it will play some games. However, if you're going to spend $700, go buy the $720 CyberPower PC that I have also previously covered on my channel. I'll put a link to that in the video description below. For an extra $20, what do you get? Bigger case, better power supply, a B250 motherboard instead of an H110, more expansion options, better fans. Overall, you get a much nicer machine, more upgrade possibilities. The cost difference is relatively minor. Once you're up in the $700 range, another $20 shouldn't be an issue, and you do ultimately get a better machine that will be upgradable for many, many years to come. However, not everyone has that option. Not everybody wants to do that option. Fair enough, I understand. That's why I cover this, because some people want to do it in pieces. Maybe you want to buy this computer and upgrade it later. Fair enough, the choice is yours. Now, looking at our real-time performance numbers, you'll see this has the same issue the last did. The GTX 1060 is bored. It's sitting around twiddling its thumbs going, okay, come on, do we have anything going on here? Feed me some data. And you will notice that our CPU usage is much higher here than it was on the i5-2400. We are pretty solidly close to 100%, bouncing around 95, 97%. And of course, as soon as I say that, there we're at 91, but hey, overall, ooh, that's gonna hurt. Explosion time, boom. Oh, look at that, not a scratch. Don't worry, that'll buff right out. In any case, look at our main system RAM usage. We're right at about 7 gigabytes of RAM. Could that be any more different than the last run? Is it the VRAM difference? Possibly. You know, to really find that out, one thing I might do is take the 6 gig card and drop it in the i5-2400 at some point and see what happens. Look at our VRAM usage, 3.3 gigabytes. Now the detail settings are exactly the same between the 4 machines. In fact, I ran the machines back to back using the same installation of Grand Theft Auto 5. I have my whole Steam folders on an external drive, so when I move it from machine to machine, the settings are retained. So the settings are absolutely 100% identical between these runs. The VRAM usage on the 3 gig card was under 2.5 gigabytes. Here, we're at 3.3, 3.4. But interestingly enough, when you look at the performance numbers at the end of the video, they are all really close to each other. Now, I made a comment earlier in the i5-2400 run when I said that it was not the smoothest of the runs. There was more stutter in that gameplay than there was on any of the other machines. In complete fairness, some of that might be the 3 gig GTX 1060 card. A 6 gig or even a 4 gig card might alleviate that. Now, I know in the past that I've recommended for 1080p gaming, a 3 gig card is just fine. I still hold to that recommendation. You wouldn't have to turn much of the detail settings down. One or two, maybe turn shadows down, maybe turn one or two of the other settings down one notch to get the VRAM usage down to 3 gigabytes. I certainly wouldn't put a 6 gig card into an i5-2400. Why? Because now you're spending so much more on the card than you are on the computer. I don't want to get into too much depth about why I made the choices I made other than to say it was to fit them within the budget allowed. However, I think that you should really pair up graphics cards and CPUs that sort of belong together. I think the 6 gig GTX 1060 is a nice choice for a $450 machine. I think a 3 gig card would be fine, but I would personally spend the extra $40 or so it costs to get the 6 gig card if you're buying a brand new machine and adding to it. On the other hand, if you're, oh, that was kind of wild. If you're buying a $150 6-year-old computer off of eBay and you're just trying to make do because you're on a budget, I think that $40 is better spent somewhere else, either upgrading your RAM or putting in an SSD or doing something else to make the machine nice. I would even make the argument that on a 6-year-old i5-2400, a GTX 1050 or 1050 Ti would also be a reasonable choice. But it is what it is. After all, these are your machines. Build it any way you want. These are just suggested builds at these price points. You can absolutely customize them. You don't have to follow what I'm doing. I'm simply trying to give you examples of what's possible. If you spend this amount of money and put this hardware in, what should you expect to see? If you put the 6 gig card into the i5-2400, for example, you'll get about 10% more performance. Because after all, the GTX 1060 6 gig card is about 10% faster. Ignoring the VRAM, it's about 10% faster than the 3 gig card. There's more shaders on it. Likewise, if you want to put an RX 480 onto the Pentium G4560, by all means, go ahead. Sometimes there's only a $15 or $20 price difference between the 470s and the 480s, and if you can find a deal on one, you're not going to hurt anything by getting a more powerful graphics card. Will it be used in GTA 5 at 1080p? No. Will it be used in Assassin's Creed Syndicate? Yes. So the choice is ultimately yours. Change it around to suit what you personally want in your computer. Finally, one more reason why there's so much different hardware here in this video, and there will be in this series of gaming tests. The $600 and the $500 PCs were built separately. They were built to meet those price points, $500 and $600 respectively, with completely different CPUs and architectures. Oh, that looks like a nice car. You don't suppose he'll mind if we take it, do you? I can't believe I escaped from the cops. Usually I don't, but well. Oh, I missed. Weak sauce. So I am testing these machines as I built them. Each one of these game performance videos will be linked to the individual playlists for those. So in the event that you came here to look for the game performance of one specific machine and you don't care about the others, well, that's what the timestamps are going to be for in the video description. I don't usually do timestamps, but I'll have to do them this time, because if you came here from the build video list for, say, the $600 FX-8300, you may not care one bit about the performance of the other three machines. You just want to see how well it performs on these 4 games on the machine that you're thinking of building. Well, we'll figure that out in the video description, or maybe the pinned comment below. Okay, show of hands time. Who thinks that car looks cool? That is a ticket me red color, is it not? If they can catch me, of course. It's not really a Lamborghini, but it's supposed to look like a Lamborghini, because I'm sure the Lamborghini look and image and style is, trademarked or patented or whatever the heck it is. Oh, I'm bad. Hey, they just crashed into me. Okay, I'm gonna shoot you. I know I'm terrible. I just killed those people in cold. Oh, that's it. I'm in trouble now. Yeah, well, I'm in a Lamborghini. I'm special. It reminds me of the line from the new Justice League trailer when, the Flash asks Bruce Wayne. He goes, "So, what's your superpower again?" And Bruce Wayne's like, "I'm rich." Yep, I'm rich. I have a Lamborghini. Unfortunately, I don't think the cops care. I don't think they like me shooting at them very much either. Are you going to go down or not? Jeez, how much shooting do I have to do? You'd think they'd eventually give up and run. Uh-oh, reinforcements are here. Yeah, that's okay. I have a fast car. They'll never get me. Boy, they are sure shooting it up, though. That's not very nice of them. Don't they know this belongs to somebody? It might be an influential member of society, and he's going to be none too pleased that you shot up his beautiful red car that I just graciously borrowed for half an... Uh-oh, that's not good. Well, time to leave this party, and let's see what oh, boom! Hole in one, or perfect shot, or ball in the corner pocket. Take your pick. Now, well, that's enough of Grand Theft Auto 5. I think you get the idea of the performance of these 4 machines at the $400, $500, $600, and $700 price level. What about World of Tanks? Now, here we are in World of Tanks. High detail level on the G4560. Now, would all 4 of these computers actually play at maximum detail? Yes, they would. But I made a point to choose high detail on all the games that I'm testing on these 4 machines to try to keep it even across the board. The decision to do that does create situations like this, where the computer is basically loafing along at 120 frames per second bored because it has nothing else to do. Now, World of Tanks largely uses 2 cores. It will go beyond that, but if you look at our CPU usage, we are under 50% usage, so we are not even using 100% of our 2 cores. Now, this will spike up at various points in the game. It depends upon how many enemy tanks are around you, what's going on, etc. It's always nice to have more performance, but generally the G4560 is absolutely plenty, because the hyperthreading makes up for any of those dips. It smooths out any jumps above 50%. Now, our graphics card is again bored. You'll see that it's fluctuating between 100% and 0% usage at times. That's because our frame rate is actually basically capped. This isn't going to run any faster than this. Our CPU is busy, the system is busy. We could absolutely turn this up to maximum detail. Furthermore, this game would run absolutely perfectly on all 4 of these machines at 1440p. Now, I realize I'm just showing you 2 games back to back that will do that. I might at some point test that, but you can take it to the bank that World of Tanks and Grand Theft Auto 5 will play very, very well on all of these machines at 1440p, because they are far more CPU limited than they are GPU limited. Oh, I can't believe I missed that. What am I thinking? That shooting was, ouch, somebody shot me, don't do that. Side note, if you've never played World of Tanks before, first of all, where have you been for 6 years? Second of all, this game is free to play. There's over 400, I think 450 tanks that you can unlock in the game absolutely for free, no charge whatsoever. It's one of those free-to-play downloadable games from a company called wargaming.net. There are tons of different nations, tons of different tanks. The game itself, I think, is about 6 years old or so. They do have a high-definition client, and we are watching the high-definition client at the moment. I didn't use the standard def on any of these machines, so this is the HD client at high detail. Now, there are premium tanks you can buy. In fact, you're watching me drive one. This red, white, and blue tank here was bought in the premium cash shop. Why? Well, to be honest with you, it gives me a nice, big, pretty tank to drive around and do some benchmarking with. I play World of Tanks with my kids more than anything else. I like World of Warships. I'm going to show you that in an upcoming game performance video. World of Tanks, I either play with my kids just for fun at the lower tiers because it's much easier, or I play it for benchmarking. However, if you want basically an unlimited amount of entertainment and an endless supply of tanks to research and unlock by progressing through the various tiers, World of Tanks will keep you busy for a very long time. And I missed again. Ugh, well, we're not testing my playing skills in this. We're testing the game performance. Come on, let's get him. And can we get him? Yes? No? And no. All right, there's no point in showing you any more of that. There's just no challenge whatsoever to that machine. Now we're on the FX-8300. If you take a look at the CPU usage, you'll notice that it's half of the previous machine. Again, cores and thread count. With an 8-thread processor and a game that only really uses 2 cores, we're at about 25% usage. This is a common misconception when people look at CPU usage. They're like, well, if we're not using 100% of our CPU, then clearly a faster CPU wouldn't help. More cores wouldn't help, not necessarily a faster CPU. Some games will use 8 threads, some will only use 2 of them. World of Tanks is an example of a game that really only uses 2 of them. Side note, look how pretty this is. We're driving down Main Street, USA. Sorry, everybody, I'm going to run over your cars. You know, for a free game, this is really nice looking. I mean, okay, it's not totally photorealistic, but I think it's pretty nice for... Oh, excuse me, you didn't need the house, did you? Yeah, I'll just drive through here. I'm just terrible, aren't I? Should I knock over the rest of it? What do you think? Looking at our real-time performance numbers, you'll notice that we're above 110 frames per second. Our main system RAM usage is very low. Our VRAM usage is very low. To be honest, a GTX 1050 2GB card or an AMD RX 460 2GB card would play this game just fine. Now, in certain areas on those cards, you might actually want to lower it to medium detail, but frankly, I expect in almost all situations, high detail would run absolutely perfectly on either of those 2 budget cards. For World of Tanks, you don't need an RX 480 or a 470. A 1050 or a 460 would work just fine. And let's see here, is he going to drive in front of me? I think he might. Oh, wait for it. There he is. And boom. Hey, that was a nice 267 points of damage. Yay me. You know, for me, that's not that bad. I'm frankly not that great at this game. So whenever I get to shoot somebody, I'm kind of excited. And he's behind rocks. Come out wherever you are. I have a gift for you. I will send to you at about 800 meters per second or whatever the speed is. I have no idea. I'll just hide like a coward behind this building. Oh, well, you didn't need the rest of your house anyway. Oh, excuse me. Oh, coming through. Yep. It was a beautiful Main Street, USA. Now it's not. Notice the frame rate dipped below 100 frames a second? Yeah, so what? It's still around 100 frames. That's spectacular performance. Okay, that's enough of the FX-8300. I'm not even going to show you the whole battle of these things because, frankly, it runs fine. The same is true of the i5-2400 and the i5-7400, so I'm going to make these relatively short as well. But I include them because I think it's so important to show you the actual video that I did actual benchmarks of and not just show you charts. I cannot stand looking at charts because they don't tell you, is the game smooth? Is it choppy? Is it beautiful? What exactly does the game look like and play like? I think it is much more important to at least show some actual gameplay footage. Now, I'm sure some people would say, well, you could do that with 30 seconds of footage. I suppose, But if you're going to go out and spend money and you're on a budget and you want to make sure that your money counts, I want to at least give you a little bit of footage that's more than just a few seconds or a small clip to give you an idea of what to expect. After all, putting a little bit more footage in here doesn't cost you anything, and if you're tired of watching, well, skip to the end and look at the minimum, maximum, and average frame performance numbers if you want to. But if you actually want to see the gameplay and maybe listen to my voice some more, well, hey, stick around. Now, this particular tank I'm driving is a different premium tank from the cash shop. Again, red, white, and blue, because we're very patriotic here. I come from the great state of Texas in the great country of America, although many countries are great, and after all, the AMX I was driving before is not exactly an American tank. It's red, white, and blue because it's French, not because it's American, but I choose to ignore that detail. I think it's French. I hope it's French. If it's not, I just offended somebody. Oh, can I get him? And no, yes. Hey, I got him. Yay me. In any case, these are both Tier 8 tanks, and they're the top-of-the-line premium tanks that you can buy in the cash shop. Ooh, ooh, I killed one. Oh, I'm so proud of myself. Hang on a second. Ring, ring. Yeah, Mom? Hey, guess what? Guess what I did? Yeah, I killed somebody. In World of Tanks. I blew them up. Oh, you're proud of me, aren't you? What? Do something besides kill people? These are computer games, Mom. Okay, talk to you later. Bye. Excuse me. Had to call Mom and tell her I killed somebody. I'm very proud of myself. She wants to know why I'm not doing something productive with my life. I am, Mom. I'm making YouTube videos. In any case, carrying on. That's enough of the i5-2400. How about the i5-7400? Hey, we're back in that, I think, French AMX tank with the red, white, and blue stripes on the top. This is usually my go-to tank because it's a big, heavy tank with heavy armor, which doesn't do the other one justice because it's, I think, a heavy tank too, or at least a heavy-ish tank, but I like lots of armor. Same reason I like playing battleships in World of Warships, even though most of my game performance videos are in cruisers because they're more exciting to watch than battleships, which are wait 30 seconds, fire, wait 30 seconds, fire, wait 30 seconds, fire. Not very exciting, but hey, you know, what can I say? If I want excitement, I'll go listen to my 3 kids argue. And I think somebody might come around that corner. Nope, I think they'll get him. I might as well. Ooh, I remember this one. Side note for anyone wondering why I'm just doing commentary at the moment. Look at the game performance numbers at the top left of the screen. It's self-explanatory. There's nothing to say. I'm simply burning the time having something interesting to say while I put enough footage in here to give you something to watch if you want to in fact see this. There's nothing to say. We're at 50% CPU usage, meaning we're using 2 cores. We're at 120 frames per second. We're at less than 4 gigabytes of main system RAM usage. We're at 1.1 gigabytes of VRAM usage. The whole thing, oh, nice hit, is completely trivial. I actually think this game was actually pretty good. I only recorded this a couple days ago. It's pretty recent. And usually I just get blown up relatively quickly. In fact, sometimes, ooh, bounce, that would have been hurt. 440 points of bouncing. Yay, armor! Usually when I do these gameplays, especially in World of Tanks, I often have to do a couple of them before I get one that's long enough that gets a decent benchmark to get a decent average frame rate. As a general rule, I want battles that are at least 5 minutes long, where at least I'm alive for 5 minutes so I can have fraps running to average out the minimums, maximums, and average and get a good average frame rate. Sometimes you're killed in the first 2 minutes, and I don't use those replays because there's just not enough to work with. Ideally, I'd like to have at least 10 minutes, but sometimes you just don't get that long, and so, ooh, those are all just bouncing. We didn't penetrate their armor, your gunner or whoever says. Thankfully, these other guys are in front of me, so they can take the hits. And but in any case, so I've sometimes have to do like 4 or 5 battles in order to get one that actually lasts for 5+ minutes. And ooh, oh, get out of the way! I want to shoot him. More kills for me. Ooh, can I track him? Nice, I tracked him. Now I won't get the kill, but I at least I damaged him. I shot off his front sprocket wheel, and I think they're gonna get the kill. Yeah, they got the kill. Oh well. But hey, I contributed to the team by knocking off his... Ooh, they got one of us. Very hectic, isn't it? By knocking off the track, he got stuck in place, and that allowed our teammates to shoot him up without him being able to retreat. So even though... Oh, missed him, and they killed another ally. But if you look at the score at the top, we have destroyed 7 tanks, and they've destroyed 4. Generally, by the time the score gets here, the outcome is usually pretty straightforward because, ooh, damage by ramming. Ouch. Anyway, once the score becomes separated like this, usually the outcome is no longer really seriously in doubt because there's another one. It becomes harder and harder for the team short on tanks to come back. Of course, that being said, if you watch the Mighty Jingles, he will definitely show you replays where people have come back from incredible underdog odds. Speaking of the Mighty Jingles, if you don't know who that is and you like World of Tanks or World of Warships, you need to check out his channel at the Mighty Jingles. He's a guy in the UK who makes daily videos on these two games and some others, who does some great playback commentary. He doesn't do performance reviews. What he does is he does replay commentary. He finds some incredible games that just have some absolutely amazing outcomes and often puts rather funny commentary to them as well. Some of his videos are longer, some are shorter, but I enjoy watching him, and if you like gameplay commentary and you like World of Tanks, World of Warships, ouch, that hurt, then you should definitely check him out. Okay, that's enough World of Tanks. As you can see, it plays perfectly. How about Fallout 4? Small spoiler alert, this is not the same performance between all four of these machines. Can you spot the differences? Well, just standing here doing nothing, it's running at a smooth 60 frames per second, but it won't be when we get to some actual combat later. Now, this is going to be the same basic section in each of these replays, and I tried to run along the same place each time to try to make them as close as possible. Now, one thing I want you to pay attention to is the graphics card usage up at the top. Because Fallout 4 is limited to 60 frames per second due to the game's physics engine, what you will notice is that the graphics card usage varies rather than the frame rate varying. Anytime we are stuck at 60 frames per second and the game can't run faster because it's not running over 60 frames per second, the graphics card will come down, but you'll notice it doesn't hold that the entire time. Now, our CPU usage is over 2 cores. We're at 66, 65. Well, okay, it's dropped there. But we are above 2 cores, so we are into hyper-threading, but not much. Now, this is not the busiest part of this game. If you are a regular Fallout 4 player, that you know that some of the city areas later on in the game are definitely busier than this one is. However, I started using this some time ago, and so I use the same save game file to make all of my videos comparable between different computers. It is what it is. Notice that our graphics card is sitting around like 0% usage. Well, now it's 100%. That's because the sample frame rate of MSI Afterburner is once per second. And so it's only catching a moment in time rather than the fact that the graphics card is actually rapidly switching from 0 to 100, 0 to 100, 0 to 100. It's only doing one sample per second. I could make that refresh much faster, but then it would be harder to keep track of the numbers. There's usefulnesses in doing so, but it does make it harder to actually see the numbers because they'd be changing very, very rapidly. Oh, come on, die, I've got a minigun. In any case, how's our VRAM usage? At high detail, we are at 3 gigabytes of VRAM usage, and frankly, the 3 gigabyte GTX 1060 should be just fine here. But is a 2-core CPU enough? Well, based upon the current CPU usage, you might think so. Well, wait till we get to the results at the end of this, and then you'll have to tell me what you think. Now, you'll occasionally see me hopping around because the hopping is a really good indication of the overall performance, how smooth it is when I ran into a tree. What can I say? That was sloppy. Oh, excuse me, strange dead dog. Yep. Oh, you died. Notice the frame rate still appears to be 60 frames per second? Well, wait till the results. You might be pleasantly surprised. However, even when you look at those results, it's very easy to say, well, okay, so the Pentium's not good, or the FX chip, or the i5 is not good. Well, can you spot the frame drops? They're there. Not very many of them, but they are in fact there. Now, I said during the Grand Theft Auto 5 gameplay that I would cut the rest of these shorter to try and keep this video from being ridiculously long. Well, I'm going to do that, and now we are on the FX-8300 at high detail. I played more than what you're watching here. I am just showing you the initial part of this to give you some idea of the performance. The actual benchmarks, the frame rates that you will see at the end of this video, were from more play. I ran down to the lake across the field. I encountered the super mutants over there. I used the minigun. So there is more going on than just this. But if I put the whole thing in here, this thing will be a 2-hour video. And, well, frankly, I think not that many people are going to watch the hour as it is. So I'm just putting snippets of in here so you can get an idea of it. Now, if you take a look at the CPU usage, you'll notice something interesting. We're using 35 to 45% of our CPU usage. Wait a minute, we're on the FX-8300. We have an 8-thread processor. So if we are at 35 to 45% usage, we are using more than just 2 cores. Didn't I just say on the Pentium G4560 that we only use 2 cores? Yes, and we're in the same place. So what's the difference? Well, by and large, the FX processors are different than the Intel processors. First of all, I have been very careful to say that this is an 8-thread chip throughout this video. AMD calls it an 8-core CPU, and in some respects it is, and in some respects it is not. Windows itself identifies it as a 4-core, 8-thread CPU, just like an i7. It shares some execution resources between 4 of the modules. It really, in fairness, is a 4-core, 8-thread chip if you wanted to be strictly technical about it. Although there's just enough of a core in those 8 cores, it's not quite an 8-core chip, but it's not a 4-core chip with just pure hyperthreading. It's complicated, and it's an interesting design, and it's different than the Intel designs, and that's why it kind of falls somewhere in the middle. I will say at this point it's water under the bridge. The FX series is going away. It is what it is. This argument might have mattered 5 years ago. It doesn't really matter in 2017 because now that these CPUs are under $100 and they're only strictly for budget purchases at this point, it is what it is. Side note, if you think this applies to AMD's new Ryzen chips, it does not. Those are a completely new architecture, new design. When they tell you they have an 8-core 16-thread chip, they mean it. It's 8 real, complete, totally isolated true cores and 16 real honest-to-goodness threads. So later this year, when you see Ryzen 5 and Ryzen 3 launch with 4-core 4-thread processors, 4-core 8-thread, and 6-core 12-thread processors, those are the real deal. Those are not made, faked up, or kind of maybe almost kind of sort of cores. No. They got rid of that and did it properly this time. It's the real deal this time around. Well, that is certainly a big, angry, mean beast. We'll leave him be, and we'll go try this out on the i5-2400. So how well does a 6-year-old CPU bought for $150 for the complete machine off of eBay run Fallout 4 at high detail? In short, perfectly. Now that we're on the GTX 1060 cards rather than the RX cards, you will notice something different. The graphics card usage is much more consistent in terms of percentage than it is on the other cards. However, I want you to look at something even more interesting, the clock speed of the card. Now it's going to vary here, but this card is only running at about half normal clock speed. If you were watching the GTX cards on the previous games, especially GTA 5, these cards will run at 2 gigahertz, but right now it's only running at about 1300 and dropping down close to 1000. Why is that? It's conserving energy. The energy-saving properties of the NVIDIA 10 series cards are nothing short of incredible. These things use next to no electricity. Now you may see that our GPU usage is running in the 78 to 80% range. Look at that, our graphics card, the fan is not even turning. That is accurate, by the way. The graphics chip is only running at 50% clock speed, so it's running in power saving mode, and the fan's not even turning. This GTX 1060 is in passive mode, so it has one fan that it's not even using, and it's at 48 degrees Celsius. It is remarkable how much power these GTX 1060 cards really have. I wish they weren't quite as expensive as they were because I'd recommend them more. For a custom build, the RX 470 and 480 are a better deal for the dollar. Now, that brings up something I don't think I've talked about in this video so far. Why do I have RX cards in the custom builds and GTX cards in the pre-builds? Long story short, the RX cards often don't work very well in the pre-builds. I have tried putting RX 460s and 470s into the 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old Acers and Dells, and I have a very poor time using them. Now, first of all, they often don't fit. I own a half a dozen different 470 and 480 cards, and not one single card will fit into this Dell Optiplex pre-built computer without case modifications. The cards are too long. It's not a power supply issue. It's not a power connector issue. It's a size issue. The cards are too big. These EVGA GTX 1060 Superclock cards are shorter with a single fan and fit into basically any basic pre-built machine. They do cost a bit more in terms of performance per dollar. The RX 480 is a better deal if it doesn't matter what case you install it in. But it doesn't matter how good the deal is if the card doesn't physically fit. So we have got a GTX 1060 running in passive mode in Fallout 4 at high detail at 1080p with the fan not even turning. This thing is sipping power. It is absolutely incredible how little power the NVIDIA cards use. And the same will hold true with the 1060 6GB card, of course. Now it's worth noting that if you buy one of those i5-2400s and you stick a GTX 1050 Ti in it, it's going to play Fallout 4 at high detail just fine. Okay, so we skip past the transition. We're on the i5-7400. Is this going to be any different? No, not really. If the i5-2400 can do it, then so can the 7400. Now, if you look at our graphics card, it's the same thing. Now, the fan is turning on this one. Why? Well, it's a different case. It's a different setup. It is, for whatever it's worth. I can tell you when the fan is turning at 53% of its max rotational speed, which is what that 53% number, the third number is on the top, means, you can't hear it. It's completely silent. I have these computers on the desk next to me when I am recording these gameplays, and frankly, that card is absolutely totally silent, so don't stress about it at all. VRAM usage, we're under 3 gigs, so the VRAM is simply not an issue. Not at high detail. At ultra detail, it kind of starts to creep up there a little bit. I actually have a philosophy about ultra detail in general. I think that ultra max or crazy or ludicrous detail in games is put there for 2 reasons. Number 1, to give people who spend ridiculous amounts of money on their computers something to feel good about themselves on. You go buy Doom and they have a nightmare detail level which requires at least 5 gigs of VRAM. You know, even the 4 gig cards won't run it. Why? Well, because it makes you feel good about buying your big expensive graphics card. I challenge you to load up most games and switch between ultra and high detail and find me the difference. In screenshots, you can see it. Absolutely. If you put it side by side and sit there and stare at it, yeah, okay, I see it. Yep, the shadow there, the wall texture there. Ooh, the bullet impacts look better. Really, you can see that while you're playing and stuff's going on? My philosophy is that games have a max ultra crazy nightmare ludicrous detail for screenshots, for product reviews, for still images to put on the box, to put on game review websites, to make the game as pretty as possible, not to make it playable. High detail is for playing the game on modest, reasonable hardware. That's not to say you can't play it on max ultra detail. The joke for many years has always been, can it run Crysis? Going way back to the first one, 10-ish, whatever years ago it was, the idea was that game came out and the best hardware on the market could not play Crysis at max detail. No matter what you spent on your computer, the hardware just did not exist at the time that the game came out. Well, but that's the point. You're not supposed to play it on max detail. Those detail settings exist to sell the game for screenshots. They exist because in static screenshots, people will look at them and go, ooh, well, isn't that pretty? And then you set the game to high detail, and then you go play it, and you go, well, isn't that pretty? Because frankly, when the game is moving at 60 frames a second and things are shooting at you and there's explosions going on, you don't have time to stop to see how pretty the leaves on the trees are anyway. In any case, that's my philosophy on detail settings and game performance. How about we go take a look at Hitman? Now, Hitman has a built-in benchmark, which is what you're watching right now. I normally am not a fan of built-in benchmarks. However, when it comes to Hitman, it's this or nothing. I have played the first level of this game. I really didn't get into it, and trying to play enough games to find a decent place to benchmark, well, it's a huge time sink, and so in this particular case, I'm just going to go ahead and use the built-in benchmark. Now, there's a benefit to doing so. Hitman is a DirectX 12 game, and you are watching a DirectX 12 result. Fraps does not work with DirectX 12, and so I'm using the game's built-in benchmark. The numbers are pulled from the benchmark file that ends up under your user folder / whatever it is, and your name, and then games. In any case, these are the numbers not from Fraps in this particular case, but from the built-in benchmark. I want you to look at the very, very top, and you will see minimum, and you'll see a minimum of 1.2. There is a single frame in the run at the very beginning it's actually the second frame of the test that's always that low. I wish they would fix the game and go in and take the first 10 frames out of the actual run. I could take the source files and do that myself and then look through it and find the one, but yeah, ignore the minimum frame rates because they're just fine. In fact, you'll notice that we're running in DirectX 12 mode because MSI Afterburner supports DirectX 12. Look at the bottom, you'll see D3D 12. That's Direct 3D version 12. Back when we used to call it, I guess, Direct 3D versus just calling it DirectX, when Direct 3D used to be something separate from DirectX. I am going to leave all of each of these built-in benchmarks in place so you can watch them if you want to. I'm going to put some music on to these. If you want to skip these and just skip to the results, it's at about 1 hour and 6 minutes. So skip about 6 minutes ahead if you just want to see the results. And so here we are at the results. Grand Theft Auto 5. First of all, if you skipped here from earlier in the video, fair enough. I understand not everybody wants to spend an hour watching that, but give it a chance if you have the time, because there's a lot of good commentary about the relative advantages and disadvantages of each of these machines. Putting that issue aside, I want you to focus on the green bars, which is the average frame rate. Now, average frame rates is what a lot of people look at. We have 62 frames per second on the G4560. We have 75 frames per second on the FX-8300, 73 frames per second on the i5-2400, and 97 frames per second on the i5-7400. Now, a couple of points. That G4560 actually plays this game just fine. And in terms of minimum frame rates, the 40, it is very smooth most of the time. In fact, I think it's actually smoother than the i5-2400, even though these frame rate charts don't show it. And if you watched all the video, I talked about that. Essentially, in terms of smooth playability, the lack of stutter, the G4560 was in many regards a better experience than the i5-2400 was, even though this chart does not indicate that to be the case. That's the problem with just looking at charts, is it doesn't tell you the whole story. The FX-8300 totally held its own. However, if I had to choose between the G4560 and the FX-8300 for Grand Theft Auto 5, I would actually choose the G4560, even though it's only a 2-core chip. Even though the average frame rate is lower, it was smoother in most respects. Now, if you can afford it, the i5-7400 crushes them all, not only in total frame rate, but take a look at the minimums. It is noticeably higher, 69 frames per second on the minimums, versus 40s and 50s on the other processors. And this is one of the differences you get with a more modern architecture. Not higher average frame rates, but higher minimums, more smoothness. I noticed this when I use these computers. I own multiple i5-2400s. They are an incredible value for the money. Think about this for a minute. $400 buys you 73 frames per second average, whereas $700 only buys you 97. Divide those out and you'll actually figure out that the i5-2400 is a much better deal in terms of how many frames per dollar that you actually get. But make no mistake, the overall smoothness and performance of that i5-7400 is unmatched compared to the other machines. If you have the money, there is a difference. Now, somebody is bound to point out that there is a 3GB 1060 in the 2400 versus a 6GB 1060 in the 7400. Wait a minute, didn't we have VRAM issues? Doesn't that make a difference? Isn't the 6GB card faster because it has more CUDA cores? Yes to all of the above. If you put the 6GB 1060 into the 2400, all of those numbers will in fact improve, the minimum, the maximum, and the average. However, they might not improve by as much as you think, because we are limited by CPU performance more than we're limited by graphics card performance. If you doubt this, go back and rewatch them. Watch how much the graphics cards sit around idling bored with nothing to do. Notice that it is our CPU limiting performance, not graphics card. There's a little bit in there. Some of the stutter the 2400 experienced is probably from the lack of VRAM as opposed to the actual CPU, but some of it's the CPU. Please note, there's more to these computers than just the CPU. The i5-2400 is running on DDR3 1333. The i5-7400 is running on DDR4 2133. It's not double the performance, but it's close. It's a good 70 to 80% faster RAM, and that RAM does make a difference at some point. With the graphics card and with the modern games, DDR3 1333 is a bit slow, and that's part of the reason of the performance. There's actually a lot of little reasons that add up to why there is a 20 frame per second difference in the minimums between the two machines. The truth is, all are completely playable. You get what you pay for is what it really comes down to. Now, World of Tanks is a bit different. Here we're completely limited by the game engine and the detail settings that I selected. If I had this to do over again, yes, I probably would have selected maximum detail. I might have even tested this at 1440p just to see if there was a difference. Here's what you can take away from this. Whether you spend $400 or $700, so long as you have anything remotely reasonably modern, you can play World of Tanks at high detail, at 1080p, at perfect performance without an issue. Even the dual-core G4560 had a minimum frame rate of 84 frames per second. Now, with an average of 118 and a max of 123, here's what that really means. It spent 90+% of its time over 110 frames a second, and there was like 1 or 2 frames down at 84. Trivial, nothing. All 4 computers were over 100 frames per second 90% of the time. Moving on from World of Tanks, how about Fallout 4? Look at this, 60 frames per second average across the board. It doesn't matter, right? Well, hang on a second, that's only part of the story. Look at the red bars, the minimums. Now, on both i5s, our minimums were at 55 and 56 frames per second. Great, right? Yes. What about the 2 custom-build machines? 21 frames per second minimum on that G4560? Yeah, the average is 60. And so it only hit 21 a little bit. The vast majority of the time it was up near 60. However, take that G4560 machine and take it into the busy areas, take it into the cities, take it into heavy combat with 12 enemies around you, and it's not going to hold 60 frames per second at high detail. Now you can lower the detail, but it's not going to make much of a difference. Why? Go back and watch the video again. The graphics card was bored. The graphics card was bouncing around between 0% and 100% usage. It had nothing to do. The same was true on all of the cards. I talked about on the i5-2400, for example, that the graphics card was just sitting there at 70 to 80% usage at half clock speed. A GTX 1050 would have run this game just fine. We are completely CPU limited on all of these machines. The difference is the i5-7400 will maintain the 60 frames per second much better throughout the game. Now, one question you might ask is, why don't you test this in the busy areas? Well, I don't have a save game file there, and while it's true that I could go download a save game file, I started using this location a long time ago, and I've been very, very reluctant to change it. I might change it when I go back and retest this for Ryzen 5, just because this isn't really a very demanding area, and I'm aware of it. But at least it does provide a comparable result, and it does show you that the older architectures and the less efficient architectures and the 2-core architectures do have a minimum frame rate problem, whereas the i5s generally don't. And that just leaves us with Hitman, DirectX 12, built-in benchmark, and this chart unfortunately doesn't tell us anything terribly useful. Now the minimums are all way down low. I know one of them was at 1, one was at like 9, one was at 6, whatever. The minimums are useless because of the way the built-in benchmark works. The average frame rates are pretty consistent across the board. Does this really indicate that Hitman will run perfectly on all 4 of these machines? I don't think so, and I'm probably not going to test this again because I am not entirely convinced that this can translate across the actual game and not just the built-in benchmark. I mean, sure, those average frame rates are fine. They're wonderful. There's no issues there. But is it playable? Will the minimums dip in actual play? I am curious to hear from any of you who actually play this game. How are the frame rates in the more complicated areas of the game? Do you see poor minimums? Is it choppy? Is this optimized like Doom and plays perfectly everywhere? So leave me feedback in the comment section below. If you play Hitman, the 2016 relaunch of the game, how does it play on your machine? I'm genuinely curious to get some feedback from you as to whether or not you think it is a good game to test, or should I just drop it? Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you loved it. Remember to subscribe to my channel with the big huge red button directly below this video. Post your comments below the video, and remember to check out the video description. Lots of links down there. First of all, links to Amazon and Newegg and eBay for everything described in this video. Links to my playlists for the 3 computers that I've covered here. Their individual reviews, many videos about them. And then finally, this video has been made possible by my Patreon supporters. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. If you have not yet contributed on Patreon and you're able to do so, if you have $1, if you have $5, it would be greatly, greatly appreciated. There'll be a link right on the screen here in a second where you can donate, or there's a link down in the video description below. But if you like these videos and you want to see more of them, if you appreciate the content that I create, this hour and 15-minute long video probably had 6 to 7 hours worth of work. This was a full solid day's worth of work to make this video, and that doesn't include the prep time or the rendering and upload time. So if you like my videos, please support me. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.